EUC Podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode number 2 of the End User Computing Podcast. I'm your host, Dane Young, and with me we have a very full house. I'm very excited to have so many guests and co-hosts on the line with me. I'll go through introductions in just a minute, but for those of you that are just tuning in, my name is Dane Young. You can find me on Twitter at YoungTech. We have done one other podcast, podcast episode number 1. You can find that online at eucpodcast.com. Click to subscribe in either iTunes or your favorite RSS reader of choice. So with me I have a number of different hosts, and we've got a lot of exciting things to talk to you about. We've got about an hour or so for this podcast, so I want to jump right into it. I'll go ahead and we'll do some introductions. And everybody shout out your Twitter handle so people can find you on Twitter and tell us a little bit about yourself. Alec Johnson, go ahead.
Okay, Alexander Johnson. You can find me at ERVIK on Twitter.
Yep, and that's ERVIK.
Yep, that's correct.
Go ahead, Andy Wood.
Is this working? Is this on? Oh, it's broken.
You're on.
I can't hear you.
Yeah,
Yes,
no, I know that. Can you? No. Yes. No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
Yes.
So why does it not come up with my face anymore? That's annoying, isn't it?
British.
Some say that's a feature.
There you go.
Andy, how do people find you on Twitter?
Well, they don't listen to me. At Gilwood_CS.
All right, Gilwood_CS. Barry Coombs, go ahead.
Good evening all, this is Barry Coombs. On Twitter, virtualizereal, virtualizereality.com is my blog.
Very cool. Chris Rogers?
Citrix Jedi and stuff.
Claudio, glad you could join us.
You guys can find me on Twitter at CROD, C-R-O-D.
Claudio is the man. I'm glad he could join this call. Dwayne, go ahead.
Hi there, DLink7 on Twitter and itbloodpressure.com is the blog. Thanks, everyone.
Very cool. Mike Nelson?
Nell Media on Twitter and everywhere else in the world.
Everywhere else. All right. I guess I just need to Google that. Steve?
Hey there, Steve Greenberg at Steve Greenberg on Twitter.
Of course. It's so obvious to me.
That was easy.
That was easy. So we got a lot of things to talk about today. I'm pretty excited. Before we jump into those, I've asked Steve Greenberg to give a little bit of a recap from last month's episode. Episode number 1. So, Steve, why don't you go ahead and tell the listeners what we talked about last time. And again, you guys can find that online, eucpodcast.com, and click to subscribe, and you can find that episode. Go ahead, Steve.
Hey, Dane, it was a great discussion. I actually went back and listened to it, too. It was even better than I thought. A couple of key points where we talked about as a team, everyone kind of agreed, when you look at end-user computing, virtualization stacks, however you're delivering it, you have to be aware of every part of the chain, every piece of the stack. You have to assure performance and scaling at storage, CPU, memory, applications. And a thing that came out that we all see, which was real interesting, is we see very often that customers go out and buy thin clients and they're not sized properly. So you could get the whole back end right, but if you don't get it to the actual end user device correctly, you have problems. Another key theme was that it's kind of a new benchmark of performance. People have SSDs in their laptops, they have GPUs, and so what they expect today is much higher, and it's growing very fast. And Thomas had a lot of good input on GPUs. We also covered convergence and hyperconvergence, where the layers of the stack are coming together in products that are kind of in a complexity that we've all dealt with as consultants and implementers of the many different pieces of architecture.
Very cool. All right, so in terms of news and announcements, I got a couple things I want to share with you guys. For anybody that's been tracking the space, you probably know that there are some massive launches happening at VMware right now, and last week was pretty monumental. Number of new products that shipped last week. Of course, these were announced in the 28 days of VMware over the last month or so. But really exciting stuff is going on, and lots of good content that's out there in terms of VMware products. The first and foremost, of course, I want to announce or talk about is the next release of their flagship product, vSphere 6. For anybody that's been tracking this for some time, vSphere 6 has been in private alphas and betas and all kinds of stuff over the last couple years or year or so, and probably one of the biggest things that interests end-user computing guys like me are a couple things, including Virtual SAN, which has probably the second release of Virtual SAN. It's now vSAN 6. How they do that with the numbering, I'm not sure how they pull that off, but it's pretty convenient to go from a 1.0 product to a 6.0 product right off the gate. But also the vGPU technology from NVIDIA is now shipping as part of the vSphere 6 technology. So very exciting stuff. I'll be at NVIDIA's conference later this week called the GPU Tech Conference in San Jose, and there's going to be all kinds of content that VMware is putting out in terms of vGPU and Horizon and vSphere 6 and all kinds of goodies. Any other noteworthy releases that dropped last week that you guys want to talk about?
There was also obviously the release of Horizon 6.1 alongside vSphere 6 to make use of the vGPU technology. There's also some nice updates in that as well. The cloud pod architecture that's part of Horizon 6 that allows you to connect multiple Horizon environments together. Previously was only a command line utility. That's now part of the graphical user interface, which makes it a lot more user friendly, as well as a number of other improvements in there just around sort of general stability, scaling, supporting 2012 R2 as an operating system for desktops, USB redirection for RDSs, as well as a number of other things.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. There were so many new features in 6.1 that it almost seems like it shouldn't be a dot release, maybe a 6.5 or some other major type of release. But to see them drop it as a 6.1 was kind of interesting to me. I think it's a pretty big release. A lot of new functionality is there. So definitely keep your eyes on that in the industry.
Definitely, and I think from a VMware perspective, the vGPU is a big thing. Citrix have been hitting VMware with that for a long time. Citrix have obviously been able to support that for a long time now. No matter where I've been going talking about VMware technologies, that's the thing, no matter whether the customer needs, well, as we discussed last time, everybody needs GPU, but that was the thing that every single customer all of a sudden needed, vGPU. So I think that's been long overdue from VMware's side of things.
It'll be an interesting thing to see how Citrix raises its game now that there's more competition in that area.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I must add to the mix that this is version 1.0, right, of the vGPU stuff from VMware. So Citrix is probably better at this point in time. It's evolution. It will happen. So everybody will have it, even Hyper-V sometime. So
it isn't indeed, but also what I think is interesting is up until this release, there was no conversation. If you wanted it, then it was a Zen desktop play.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
Even for a version 1, and we talked about this last time in episode 1. Sometimes good enough is indeed good enough.
Yep.
And just because it's a version 1 product doesn't necessarily mean that it won't be able to achieve what it is that you need it to do. So, you know, Citrix are going to have to, in my opinion, Citrix are going to have to differentiate faster, quicker, higher, faster, stronger. Yeah?
And I think what we've been seeing recently is obviously VMware trying to stay ahead via acquisition now. We've seen the Immediate purchase around sort of persona management in February. We saw Cloud Volumes last year coming now as part of App Volumes. So they're making sure that they are staying ahead and being able to put ticks in the box that maybe Citrix can't. Although at the moment, obviously, they are kind of separate bolt-on products. You could maybe use some of those technologies with Citrix as well. But VMware are keen to make people aware that they're serious in this industry, and they don't want to be falling behind what maybe some of the others are doing.
Hey Barry, this is Steve. Do we know that those are going to remain standalone products, or do they become exclusive to Horizon View?
As far as I understand it, at the moment they are kind of billing them as products still to be used as open products. And I think we've seen that a little bit recently. If we look at Horizon Workspace, they included the ability to publish then app applications on that. And the messaging that I certainly have is VMware are very keen to be able to tell their own story. But equally, they want to be the part of everybody's world in the cloud world. Certainly, it's about hybrid. It's about multiple vendors, and I think in end-user computing, they're not going to be there for every battle. So I think having an open platform with some of these pieces of software, particularly within their management stack, gives them another kind of avenue to go down as well.
Dwayne here. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Dwayne.
I've been working with Horizon DAS, and I know from a GPU perspective, it definitely can be used. There's just no nice UI. It's just a separate add-on for it. But
yeah,
I think anything's going to be better than VSGA. So it's a thumbs up in my mind, even if it's 1.0.
But wait a second, VMware guys get really defensive when you attack VSGA. It's such a great product.
I don't want to do whip out a spreadsheet and try to figure out if I have the right codecs and DirectX and try to juggle things around. So it's a win-win.
Yeah. So two more, and we can dive into these a little bit later. I want to kind of wrap up the review section, but it's interesting to note a couple of 1.0 launches that happened last week. One that may be of interest to some guys that are working in more private cloud type of scenarios, and that's VMware Integrated OpenStack released a 1.0 product. But to this audience, probably more interesting is Flex, which I think anybody that's touched VMware Ace at any point in their careers would be very interested and keen to touch Flex and see how that particular product addresses some of the BYO of Mac and Windows devices in a little bit different way than Ace ever did. So more to come on that. Just as a technologist, I'm very keen on the VMware Software Manager that they released, which is probably a long time coming. But the basic concept is make it easier to get the VMware bits. Because as we all know, with all of their different products, it's become very kludgy and convoluted and challenging to download all of the different product updates when they come available. So I'm pretty excited about the software manager as well.
This is Mike. I just want to throw in, the main complaint that I've had for a while is that they finally got around to rebranding everything to this crappy vRealize name. And I think that's going to be the worst mistake that they've made marketing-wise, and people are going to stand up and bitch about that because it's just ridiculous, Anyways, I'm an automation guy, so, the Orchestrator release, which basically was just a rebranding, not much there, API integration with ServiceNow and a couple other things, but there really wasn't a lot of change there. I will say that the Power CLI, huge change, huge. Something we've been waiting for years is that Power CLI is now a module and not a snap-in. It's no longer a pain in the ass to use. So from an automation standpoint, they added something like 60 new commandlets, a lot of it around NSX and around BPALs and BSAN and all that kind of good. But it's from an automation standpoint, the Orchestrator I haven't looked at vCloud and what they're doing there with that yet, but I've already loaded the orchestrator and the Power CLI, and so far, like I said, not much change on the orchestrator side, but the Power CLI stuff really rocks.
I was pleased to see that they've now included Mirage in with the Power CLI options as well. So certainly the end user computing stuff has sometimes in the past lacked on the Power CLI. So it's good to see that some more bits coming through.
And we all love PowerShell and automation, so definitely makes our lives easier. Let's go ahead and dive into the primary topic for today's show or episode. And we started last week or last month's episode number 1 talking about infrastructure and all the stuff that goes in the data center to make end user computing work. Want to move the conversation up the stack a little bit and talk about operating system management strategies and the different technologies that are employed by a lot of different organizations out there, kind of the evolution of how that came to be, and where we're going, where we've been, and the different technologies that are available today. So I'll let, let's see, Andy Wood, I think I'll let Andy Wood talk about kind of the history of operating system management approaches. I know, my early starting career, there was a lot of light touch and batch scripting to get different things automated. But Andy, why don't you go ahead and give us the genesis of operating system management strategies?
Genuinely, what did I do to you? Did I lose the competition at the beginning of the entire podcast?
Yeah, sorry, you got the short straw.
Oh, you go for one bio break and suddenly you get voted to do the most boring piece of the entire podcast. Thank you very much.
It's not boring to me. I'd be happy to take it.
But the challenge is on you to make it not boring.
Oh, the pressure.
The pressure.
I think fundamentally there's been an evolvement over time. I remember being at the first. Well, let's do before end user compute. Let's do desktops themselves. Wasn't always easy. There weren't necessarily the tools. One of the reasons that the WinFrame back in the day was particularly useful was because it was a pain to manage a disparate network of individual PCs where quite often there wasn't a concept of admin access. Now, granted, there wasn't a patch Tuesday. There probably wasn't even a patch by Tuesday or a patch monthly. There were very rarely patches, but everyone did their own stuff on their own thing. The best you could hope for was a standardized build going out, and there were tools to do that. So like your Ghost build, standardized images that went out into the environment, and hopefully no one messed around with them, but you knew darn well that they would, and that you'd have to go and fix them. And the easiest fix was to bring it back, to reinstall the operating system and have at them again. A nice thing about that server-based computing environment was that you could have a more structured process, because you could manage that delivery of applications, manage that server environment, and not necessarily care about the endpoint as much. Tools caught up. The ability to manage the delivery process of an operating system became not necessarily easy, but more straightforward. It was still clunky though, still lots of components. Anyone who remembers Microsoft tools for deploying not only operating systems but applications back in the day, they were complex beasts. There were lots of bits that would fall over or fail to report. It was difficult and tricky. As time has progressed, services have come into place that allow automated builds over the network. Gold images have become the thing. And as I say, back at Bri Forum, I remember talking about, so Vision App had automated deployment services. So you could script and build and deliver a image across the network. I was using Windows automated deployment services, Windows deployment services to deploy Citrix builds on bare metal back in the day when hypervisors were a strange and exciting thing. And that has progressed that automation. So ultimately, what you want to do is get yourself in a position where you script. Mike talks about being the automation guy. You want to automate that process as much as possible. You want to automate the bejesus out of it, because you want a consistent and validated environment that you know is going to work, and then ideally you don't want the users to mess about with it. And that's where we're looking to be today for operating systems for desktops. But now it's not just desktops, is it? We talked last week about end-user compute not just being about desktop PCs or server-based computing PCs. Now there's a whole variety of operating systems that are available. So it's your phone has an operating system, even that clunky old Nokia has an operating system, your tablet has an operating system, your Chromebook has an operating system. How do you manage all of those? Because it's not just about delivering the build, it's about ensuring that everyone has consistent environment, so that when you connect end user device A to service B, it works in a consistent manner. Because the last thing you want is for everyone to have their own jailbroken, messed about with, modified stuff in order to connect to your environment, because that just makes support and the user experience harder. How did that do?
I think that did pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good.
I like it. Hey, Claudio, are you still out there? Do you mind chiming in and talking about the evolution as you've seen it? I know you've got a long history in this space.
Oh, is it just the old guys? That's ageist.
That's it.
I can tell you guys about my history, but my history is really dumb because I came into the space when everything was easy.
What I'm seeing is really, I don't know, we are kind of getting back to what it was before.
Yep.
And the reason why I say that is, if you look back, everything was unmanaged, and then everything was managed, and then we got into the BY, anything, and then things apparently started to get better, and people were happy. And now I can give you my personal perspective on that. A couple weeks ago, I had to join a company, not as an employee or anything, but as someone that is almost like an internal resource of some sort. So I have an email address and everything, and then they use something to deliver like the email system they use and all that crap on your phone. And I was like, okay, sure, I can use my phone, and apparently they support it. So I connect, and then all of a sudden, like, they start enforcing policies on my phone. I don't know, it's supposed to be a BY, my own phone, and now I'm locked, and I have policies, I have profiles on my phone, so if I'm at home, the phone doesn't lock. If I'm at work, the phone locks. And I want all these things to work properly. And because of these policies coming from IT that allow me to bring my phone, I told them, screw this, like, you're going to give me a full phone. I prefer to carry 2 phones than having my personal device with all this junk enforced.
Yep, exactly.
So really, like, I don't know if we are really seeing everything going towards a world where we can manage everything, or we want to manage everything, or if we really need to find some sort of, medium hep term between like Wild West and BYOD. Because right now, man, like, honestly, after using BYOD for all these years, I hate it. And I hate it because people are enforcing all this garbage on me.
So, well, and potentially that is an interesting thing. If we take, PC land back in the day, where everyone wanted to, where there was a desire to try and manage it in order to make deployment of stuff easier. If you took it back a bit further than that, where everyone was on shared systems and they had terminals back into the environment, they had a very tightly managed environment, they had a very tightly managed system, and they had to pay for their compute time, and they didn't really like that, so they all bought PCs. But then organizations realized that having everyone doing their own thing was costly and expensive, so they attempted to manage it. And I think we're in a similar shift again. Everyone doesn't want a number of users don't necessarily want to have a very locked down environment. As you have bizarrely not sworn at once, which is very unlike you, Claudio. It's very impressive. No one wants that restriction. So they bring in their own devices and they bring in their own stuff in order to let them get on with their work, because ultimately people will want to do a job. It's interesting to see this whole cycle come around again, just with a wider range of devices. And to Claudio's point, because it's a wider range of devices, I don't think we're ever going to catch up. And there's a point where you say, let's accept and see if we can manage it in a way that is helpful to the business in terms of IP protection and content, but helpful to the users in terms of flexibility.
I think as an industry, we're trying to get to a point where we can do just the applications. It always becomes a bit hard because Windows is so old; it's got so much legacy. But Claudio mentioned ThinApp in the crowd chat. And that was kind of like it had such great potential because it was stripping away the need for the operating system to a certain degree. But now we've kind of come back. But myself personally, I don't ever. Even when I was an operations guy, I didn't really give two licks about the OS so much, but who outside of maybe PBS and maintaining the golden image, I don't know what people are doing out there to maintain their fleets.
Right.
Well, but haven't we been having this exact same conversation for 20 years now? I mean, that which was called Metaframe, which was then called Presentation Server, which is now called XenApp. And then, okay, sure, let's get rid of the OS. You don't need an OS anymore. Deliver any app to any place and do your data, do your work. Same conversation. Where are we now?
Well, this is where, going back to the history, it is the same conversation. And if you have the problems that Claudio is describing, I think you're doing it wrong. Because if you have to let somebody bring a device and then mess with it, you're not doing it right. You should be able to give a security separation. So a lot of the environments we build, the internal Wi-Fi is on the outside, right? Bring your device, do what you want. We're going to lock down all the policies. We're going to lock down virtual channels if you're on the outside, and they make it too hard. But going back to the image and OS management, I think to me the big gorilla in the room is Microsoft. I mean, we've had these different options over the years, running around ghosting or multicasting Ghost or Altiris, but Microsoft has creeped in and pushed System Center into pretty much the stack of every product. It's kind of like when they bundled the browser with the OS. If you want to do Zen Desktop, you need System Center Virtual Machine Manager. Well, to buy that, you have to buy the whole stack. So where I go now, it's everybody's just kind of defaulting to System Center, and I think it is going back to an older way of doing things. But the cycles are going around, and Microsoft's exerting tremendous pressure. What I think gets lost is some of the cool innovations that came out of VDI and SBC, like PVS, for example. Streamed images, read-only images. Big part of the special sauce in our projects is AppV, is virtualizing at the app layer, so you can make that separation. And I feel like we are going a little bit backwards. I forgot who said that. And not necessarily taking those innovations and pushing them forward, where the OS should matter less and less.
I've got to admit. No, I'll let you go, Barry, and then I'll jump in.
I think from my side, as you're saying there around Microsoft, that's kind of we're seeing a lot of System Center out there, particularly in the education standpoint, where they almost get that stack for free, and the education establishments that I'm working with are jumping all over the System Center. But obviously, working more with VMware customers, Mirage is included in quite a lot of their stack, and we've had real successes with using Mirage, not just to manage the physical desktop estate out of there, and particularly around sort of Windows XP to Windows 7 migrations. The fact that it's working at a per block level to save quite a lot of time. The users are still able to remain on their machines while we're doing the upgrades, and they don't lose their data, etc. But also then using Mirage to manage our golden images and those base layers. And then going back to what we were talking about earlier, with how do we need to manage Chromebooks, what happens when the users, I'm very much with you, Steve, that we're doing something wrong. If we're having to secure someone's personal device, we need to be securing the data at the data layer or the application layer, rather than imposing policies upon an end user's device that they're bringing into the business.
Yeah, and I think VMware had this vision a couple years back, and the execution wasn't that great from a mobile device perspective with Switch. If anybody remembers Switch, So I think there's been a lot of discussion about the whole carry two devices because you never want your employer being able to lock down your personally owned device. There's been a lot of talk about that, not a whole lot of action about that, and that's something that I think we could do better as an industry. The other aspect is, when you look at like Type 2 hypervisors and different management products that are out there to help in the Type 2 hypervisor for BYOD, and I mentioned Flex earlier in this conversation, and Citrix has been struggling to get their product to market, but Desktop Player for Mac is there. Desktop Player for Windows has been coming for quite some time. I don't know when that's ever going to happen, but the Type 2 approach is a nice compromise for guys like Claudio's situation, where he's a contractor, he's not a full-time employee, he doesn't want the employer managing and getting access to all the stuff on his personally owned devices, but he needs to create some level of isolation between the bubble network that the employer is allowed to be in and his personal network that he's in. And I think there's a lot of good technologies out there that can help. I just don't think that we're at that point in the industry where there's a real cohesive solution for how one goes about this on all the different device types and platforms. I think the industry's evolving, but I don't think it's there yet. Anyone else?
Well, it's hard to say, like, if I can just, compliment, it's hard to say how much more we can actually do. And, the problem at the end of the day is legal, right? Like, one thing is on my PC, I can certainly run a VM that someone provided. Okay, they're all good. Like, and then they can do whatever they want on the VM. That's all fine. But how you control and coexist with the personal preferences. Like, I don't want on my PC to, for example, lock the screen and I have to type a password every single time. Mm-hmm. Or I don't want the phone is the worst case, I think, because the PC, as I said, you can do a VM and you can sort of hide some of the garbage, but on the phone there is no other way around. The phone, like, you don't want the guy, if the person is somewhere, you must enforce, let's say, a passcode to unlock the phone. But as I said, what if I don't want that? Like,
I think those kind of things can be overcome by technologies like AirWatch, where you're not using the inbuilt mail app, you're using a dedicated mail app for the secure mail, where separate policies can be directed directly to that application layer, rather than having to rely on the phone being the secure area. The application is the secure area.
Yeah, but this goes beyond the application. Like, the problem here is not the application, because you have to control the device. Like, the device has to be, locked at all times, for example. It has nothing to do with the application. But I don't want anyone to unlock the device.
Can I shoot in something? I hear exactly what Claudio is saying. It's Alex here. This is a matter of the privacy policy, which are enhanced. It's different from country to country. I know Canada and Norway, it's similar. Other EU countries, I know the US has their policies, but it all comes down to if you as a user want your company to, at any given time, know where your device is at. And, some countries that's not allowed. You can't sign up for something, you can't enforce the employee to actually say, yes, I want the managed device. And I know it's hard for Citrix with Send Mobile and AirWatch from VMware to accept that, because they are definitely trying to give us better tools to manage stuff. But at the end of the day, it's all down to what's allowed and what's not allowed. And a public company, everything is probably allowed as long as you get the employees to sign off on it. In the sector that's government and such, it's not that easy.
Yeah, the only thing that I'll add to that is that some of the challenges, and I can't confirm this for sure with AirWatch, but I know with other technologies like Good and anyone else that has a secure mail container for their mobile phones or devices. The challenge is that management of the devices is required in order to get some of those components down to the devices. Now, obviously, it's a policy decision within the organization to dictate what they can and can't do, but if the organization says you will use our secure email container on your mobile phone, and in order to do that, you have to give them rights through their device management agent to get control of your device, it's this real gray area. I would like to say that just like application publishing over the last 20 years has evolved the industry for Windows apps and desktops, maybe there's a next generation evolution for mobile devices, iOS, Android, and everything else like it. Brian Madden wrote an article a little while ago, Are You Ready for Virtual Mobile Infrastructure? And what he talked about in that article was a couple technologies from a couple different companies, including Raytheon, who make application publishing engines for iOS and Android-based applications. So the concept, very similar to XenApp for Windows apps and desktops, and hopefully in the future, Linux apps and desktops on both the Horizon platform and Citrix platform. These technologies, virtual mobile infrastructure as the term has been coined, will give us the ability of running that iOS application from a virtualized infrastructure in the data center and streaming that iOS application to look as though it's native, but use the bits on the wire for presentation of that application from the data center. I think that has a lot of future, and I actually saw my first use case for that come up this last week, where a customer is very hot on these technologies and starting the evaluation because they don't want to manage the devices, they don't want to manage the applications on the devices, they just want to seamlessly deliver native applications like iOS and Android as long as they have a network connection to any of these devices. Very interesting use case. I'm interested to see how that evolves.
Well, let me throw a monkey wrench into this whole conversation, because that's what I do, and that's what I love doing. Are we having the completely incorrect conversation, the fact that this is a technological problem? And is this more of a process, procedure, and perception problem? Is this a problem where, from the mainframe days to the client-server days, now to the cloud days, where we have this... And again, I'm going to throw something out there, and I know I'm going to get stomped on, but I'm going to do it anyway. We have this incorrect perception of ownership. This is my device. This is my data. And yet, your device and your data, you're putting out to the cloud. Okay, you can't have it both ways. So again, is this a...
Well, if I paid for the it's mine, man.
Okay.
Like, don't tell me it's the cloud. The cloud owns my device. I paid for that junk. It's mine.
You totally make my point for me. Are we as a technological consuming people, are we as technological consumers thinking of it the wrong way? Not forward thinking, not forward looking. We're back looking. We're looking back to our devices, our data, and yet we want to have this cool stuff called cloud. And are the two really compatible? So, like I said, I don't think this is a technological problem.
No, I don't.
I agree with you, Chris. I think there's better ways to do this, and it's not yours. If you work for a company or you're a consultant and there's a policy that says you can access this, you can't access that, we should just do it. We shouldn't even try to mix the devices if that's the case. If they're going to stomp all over Claudio's device, give them a laptop instead, or have a policy. Hey, you can access this from your device, but I'm going to stomp on it. Sign this paper. I think we make too much out of it. I think you're right.
I would like to think.
You can't go with do it or else on your own device. You've got to provide, and this does go back to policy, and it goes back to Chris's point. The policy is either accepting that if you want to use your own device, that's cool, that's fine. Your entire capability will be restricted, because if we don't know about your device, if we can't manage it in any way, we'll let you pay Minesweeper, and that's it, right? Yep. And if you want extra services and to be able to do your job and all of those other things, then you must give up a little bit of stuff as well, and that it needs to be a two-way process, not
Absolutely.
just
I mean,
Let's manage it all, either or. And again, if you don't want to do that with your own device, the company, the organization needs to be able to step in and go, well, if you're not going to do it on your device and accept our requirements, then we must provide you with a device. The flip side of that is, when they provide you with a device, don't complain that it is not a MacBook Air. Yeah, it'll be something clunky, and it'll be something a bit ridiculous, and you'll have to carry it around in addition to what it is that you've got yourself.
Yeah.
But you make some choices, and you take some responsibility.
And that really is the choice. And you know, much like Claudio, I go to different customers, and they have different requirements. And I just came off a contract where they forced me to carry their old archaic BlackBerry. I'm like, why am I doing that?
Yeah, right on.
Why am I carrying two devices? No, I don't want a laptop. No, I don't want a BlackBerry. There are capabilities that you can use my device. You can use it in certain ways. You can deliver your data to my device in a secure manner, and everybody's happy. No, we can't do that. You know, it violates government security standards. Okay, whatever.
I think the thing that fixes all this is, do you want to have a job? Have a device or be fired.
Good call.
If you don't want a job, don't take the device. Very cool. So, let's talk about where things are in the space today, and just for the sake of the conversation, keeping a little bit more focused, let's stick to Windows apps and desktops, and let's talk about the different technologies, advantages and disadvantages that we're seeing in the space. And I know we've got DWAYNE on the line from Nutanix, although he's not sponsored by Nutanix, but he can share some of his perspectives on shadow clones. But who would like to take a discussion on link clones, provisioning services, machine creation services? Who can summarize those types of technologies in 5 minutes or less?
I can.
Go for it, Andrew.
I think the difficulty with all of those technologies, with PVS and with MCS, is they give you an easy deployment method. PVS slightly more easy or slightly more easy, I think, than MCS, but they give you an easy deployment method. What they don't do is give you a structured method of getting that base image in. A common mistake with PVS or MCS deployments is to think that because you can create a version that you are in some way, shape or form managing the desktop. If you haven't built in a structured way and understand in a structured way what it is that you did before you deploy with MCS, before you deploy with PVS, then inherently you've got a service out there, a system out there that may not be rebuilt and has stuff in that you don't quite understand.
Cool.
Full stop. Period. As I believe the Americans say.
So
I think
I'll just give a high-level overview of how the different technologies work.
You wanted that? Oh no, I know. I just wanted to go off on a rant about people not managing their images properly.
Well,
I've done that. Thanks very much. Away you go.
Away you go. Yeah, my favorite is probably the Briform slide deck that Jim Moyle uses, where he shows the architecture, provisioning services, and stream from the network and all this fun stuff. And then he goes to the next slide, which is the architecture of machine creation services, and he has one big fat line in the middle that says, "This slide intentionally left blank." And that's about the difference of provisioning services to machine creation services, and even link clones for that matter. Basically, provisioning services, and this goes back to my entree into IT from when I was in education and used the product formerly known as Ardence. We had computer labs where we had servers that we'd stand up in the corner that would set all of the devices in these computer labs to boot from network, and then we would have an image, a gold image as we called it, on the provisioning server, and all of those devices that were booting from network would pull the image from the provisioning server in the corner, and it was our way of getting around some of the other pain that we didn't like so much with Deep Freeze, if anybody remembers that fun company, and having to lock down the devices so that every time they rebooted they would go back to a good working state. So provisioning services at its fundamentals is a boot from network, Pixie type of scenario where the image is streamed down. Machine creation services is more of a provisioning model where the images are created from a master virtual machine on an infrastructure, VMware, Zen server, Hyper-V, whatever it may be. And it falls more in line with VMware's link clones, and the only piece that I feel has been missing in the Citrix stack over the years, and we've been asking for it, as anybody that works for a storage vendor would know, is the ability in Citrix to create full clone desktops, very similar to what is available in Horizon, where you specify your template, you specify a customization specification, and then say, go create me 500 desktops, and it uses the built-in APIs within the hypervisor to clone out those desktops. I really wish it was there. It's not there, so instead many of us resort to all kinds of scripts, including Power CLI, to clone out those desktops and customize them using full clones. Anyone want to dive into why somebody would want a full clone versus a linked clone?
I can start the journey on that one. Generally, it depends on the greater requirement for the user. One often requirement is around licensing. Maybe there is something tied to the individual machine configuration in some way, whether that's host name, whether that's MAC address, whether that's an activation code or something like that, and being able to delete or renew that application isn't easily done. Maybe it's something around the nature of the way their application is written, where the data is going to be stored within that desktop, and how they're going to be using that desktop, which means that treating it as if it was a physical PC but in the virtual world would be the right way to go. But then that whole operating system management becomes even more important, because instead of managing that one golden image and then re-provisioning the pool, you're then having to treat it like a physical desktop and manage it as such, with patches, deploying out updates, and so on and so forth.
Yep.
I think.
Also bear in mind.
Go ahead, Alex. I think you were first up.
Yeah, you were. Or maybe you weren't.
I was just going to say, I think it kind of depends, like, the journey of where you get started. If you are horrible at physical desktops, I kind of have a strong inkling that you might be down the link clone path, because you could easily deploy off this one image. But I don't know if that, you kind of run into your own problems trying to maintain that sucker. But I think the full clones, the one benefit that I see is you could use your traditional deployment tools with full clones, and most storage technologies today have enough smarts that can kind of get around from the impact on storage. The only thing that you can avoid today is the cost that it takes to maintain the desktop from a CPU perspective. Like, even if you have the fastest storage in the world, when you boot your desktop, it's still going to take CPU. So there's still an impact on maintaining your apps.
Yep.
Indeed, let's not forget that in order to go to PVS, you've got the infrastructure that PVS requires. In order to go to MCS, all right, it's a little bit easier, but either way, you can't just lift and shift existing images into that environment easy. With MCS, you've got to start again. And in each of them, with MCS, with PVS, and with link clones that VMware has, all of them have a write filter. All of them take a hit when they're doing write activity. So potentially you're impacting the performance of that environment by using that method. If you've got a full clone and you can accommodate the storage using whatever back-end storage technologies, some are absolutely marvelous. I work for one vendor that does it. But if you can have a full clone, then you've not got that write filter in place, and you can improve the performance of that desktop, because you're not taking that hit of having to read from one location and write to another. That write filter is not in place.
But surely the consideration then needs to be how often you're going to be doing the updates, when you're going to be doing the updates to those desktops, making sure they're not happening all at the same time. If you're sending down a gigabyte update to each of those, unless I suppose that depends on what the storage is doing on the back end and how much it's going to be able to deduplicate that effort.
And indeed whether it is optimized. I mean, the interesting thing with a full clone environment is that from a management perspective, and let's go back to talking about OS management. From a management perspective, if you have full clones, you manage them in exactly the same way as your desktops. And as we discussed last week, most organizations are going to have an environment that encompasses not just server-based computing, not just a VDI, but standard desktops as well. If you can simplify the management of that environment, then that is a better thing than having VDI managed in one way and physical desktops managed in another. Why not just manage everything in the self-same way? Because ultimately it's about making your life easier, consistent user experience, easy user experience.
I think there's also a point when you when you go through that pain to get to a link clone desktop, a non-persistent desktop, you're also getting to the point where you're making the desktops disposable, which has certain advantages to it, because if we're saying that each person has a dedicated desktop, we're attaching some worth of that desktop to that user. So as well as understanding how we're going to patch it and maintain it, we also need to understand how we're going to protect it. What happens if that image does corrupt? How are we going to restore that image? Do we need to be backing up that link clone at that time? Now, that is all possible with technologies like Mirage, but it does add a certain overhead as well. So you've got to kind of understand what works for you, and it might be a mix. It might be that inside your organization, it probably is inside your organization, you do have users where link clones will just work, where that is the simpler way to manage it, where having that single image to manage will work. Then you will have other users where it's just not worth the pain to go down the route of trying to put them on a link clone non-persistent desktop. So you do want to give them a full clone, and you will use technology like Mirage or SCCM or something like that to manage those images, but also you'll then need to protect them, make sure that if the worst does happen, you can recover what is making that desktop so special to that user.
Hey Barry, I agree with that. It's really just a set of different tools that are available to you, and you've got to choose the right one. But I do have to defend the much maligned PVS, because everyone characterizes the infrastructure as so complicated. It's really not. I think that's way overblown. The advantages, as Dane described, of streaming, pristine images from one place to many has great advantages. Obviously, you have to use it where it's appropriate, but I think that we're still sort of looking back. Looking forward, we want a dynamic situation. We want to not worry about all that. Layering has a lot of potential to handle that. And what we've been doing for a long time with AppV and other app virtualization, sliding the apps in above a standard OS. So I agree with the concept that it's a bunch of tools, but I think we should also push the envelope forward where the whole thing can be more dynamic and layered and, configurable.
I think the decision tree is, do you have to print or not? And then you go from there.
Yeah.
Wow, Dwayne, thank you for boiling it down to so simple terms.
Steve, to your point, I mean, if you look at it from a layering, when you talk about layering, I mean, even companies like Mocha 5 have been doing that for years. That was the whole basis of how Mocha 5 got going. But also, to your other point, PBS got a really bad rap when it started. I mean, I don't know if anybody remembers Desktop Server, when that was the 1.0 of PBS, which was just crap. But it got a lot of bad press. Not only that, but because it wasn't, when it came out of the gate, it took a lot of resources. It took a bunch of administration tasks that nobody wanted to do. To put it bluntly, the package, the entire package was kind of a pain in the ass to manage. So I think that it's kind of matured, but people haven't caught up to that yet.
That's a good point. That's true of all the technologies, right?
Yeah.
If you give it time, you can't judge it on its early performance.
Well, look at Vue. Look at Vue. If you judge Vue on what 4.0 and 4.5 was, nobody be using it.
If you judge WinFrame on what WinFrame was, if you judge Windows on what Windows has always been, you could say the same thing.
Hey, 3.1.1 was awesome.
Yeah, there's a saying: if you're not embarrassed of your first product, then you came too late. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you didn't ship soon enough.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, at least we could print from Windows 3.1 and not from Vue 4 or 4 or 5.
Only on HP printers.
Back to that printing. Can we just get rid of printers altogether? Anytime anybody requires me to print, I freak out.
Save some trees, man.
We can replace it with secure faxing.
Stop the whole print shebang.
It wouldn't be an end-user compute conversation if there wasn't printing. I personally thought we'd last out to more than episode 2, but there you go.
Too late.
Yeah, too late. Well, cool. I think we've had a lot of really good discussions on here. We've touched on, I think, just about any and every idea and concept around image management strategies and operating system management strategies. We've certainly talked about server-based computing. virtual desktop infrastructure, intelligent desktop virtualization, some of the Type 2 hypervisor, Mirage type of approaches. I think the future is, oddly enough for me to say this, going to be more of the same and more of different. I think there's some different technologies that are out there that are starting to come to market that are taking a little bit different spin on this whole operating system management strategies, but I think Steve nailed it. I think we're going to continue to see Microsoft at the forefront of a lot of this stuff because for the most part it's their operating system, and they lead the charge and other people conform and adopt what they're doing in terms of OS management. So definitely some good stuff. Last time I introduced a segment that we called Ask the EUC Experts segment. We haven't had any questions come in yet, so I'll keep that going and keep that open in case there's anybody else that comes in. Also had our friend in the space, Eric Halverstein, ZenApp blog, started a new podcast called the Ask Eric podcast. So if you have any questions you want to ask Eric, you can do it that way. Otherwise, we have the web form set up. One last thing before we wrap up. Are there any additional thoughts? I'm going to go around the room, as it were, and just one last thought on this topic of operating system management strategies. And why don't you go ahead, Alex?
I think we covered the basics of it. As Claudio put it, SCCM sucks, and it will probably suck for a long time coming. Everybody's tying their products into SCCM, so we will probably, as you mindly reminded us in your wrap-up speech, we will see a lot of the same crap in the years to come. And yeah, who knows? Maybe Microsoft has something up their sleeve with Windows 10 and all that stuff going on. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting 5 years.
So you saved your final thought to say that SCCM sucks. I think that says a lot.
And now 3 other people can't say that.
If there's one thing we want to leave our listeners with, it's that SCCM sucks. That's awesome, Alex. Thank you for that. Andy, go ahead.
I would say that we're seeing a variety of methods of managing environments and managing operating systems. Still, it's interesting that SCCM is so prevalent, in part because it's given away, in part because it's seen as the only way, and yet there are many different technologies that allow you to manage your operating systems for a Windows environment. I've been working with Jim Moyle, actually, on some interesting lifecycle management stuff that Citrix is promoting. All of those vendors will find it difficult while Microsoft maintains its hold on SCCM. For Windows, it'll be interesting to see how other operating systems are brought into that environment and how organizations, Citrix included, can take delivery of that operating system not just to your own environment but out into the cloud, expand it out and contract it in as need be.
Very cool. Barry?
I think from my side it's just making sure that you're thinking of your users, understanding the use case and how their desktops are going to work for them, and that will help you underline how you're going to be managing those images. Ultimately, remember you're probably going to have both physical desktops and virtual desktops, so understand how you can have a single strategy for managing the operating system on both of those and patching them and keeping them up to date for minimal ease and a way that's going to work for your users.
Just a quick question on that before we wrap up that thought. I know that's been a long discussion for the whole persistent versus non-persistent debate. Just a quick poll for everybody on the phone, and we'll go through this. How many times are you seeing that those are being managed by the same teams within in an organization? And how many times are you seeing that those are different teams? I know everybody's going to give the consultant answer of it depends, but just if you had to generalize and say it's managed by the same team or it's managed by different teams, how many would say that physical are managed or not managed by the same teams and therefore the same strategy is either required or not? Alex?
Are you asking everybody just to yell it out or what?
Sure. Why not?
Different. Totally different.
Totally different.
Yeah, different too.
Yeah, Different.
Different.
And,
Cool.
and Dane, that if I could add, that's the problem, is that we're still in this choppy world of how to do things, drawing
Right.
at different ways of doing it. Organizations don't come together and go, "What's our strategy? How are we going to do it?"
I think that's the best one. Everyone would like to have as few strategies as possible. Granted, every strategy is a great strategy up until it gets put into the field, yeah. But everyone wants to have a single strategy, and wherever you deploy MCS desktops, PVS desktops, linked clones, wherever you deploy something else, you start adding complexity and difficulty, and everyone would like that to removed. Thanks
And I
very
think if we're talking about EUC, we need to be standardizing, whether that's physical or virtual, it doesn't matter. We need to be giving the same user experience. We need to be thinking about the users, what they're doing when they get on the device, and how they're working in that environment. If that's managed by two different teams in two different ways, then we're never going to achieve that.
And it's got to become holistic. For decades, the server guys, the Citrix guys, became the people in charge of apps because they knew how to. It's got to become part of the culture and part of the strategy and part of the training and the way things are deployed.
So in other words, you have to change people's perception. Oh, look at that.
Good luck with that.
Needs to stop being the server guy or the desktop guy. It needs to be the EUC
guy.
guy.
The guy. Yeah.
Very cool.
Or alternatively, stop making this shit up as you go along.
Barry, I already asked you for last thoughts. So, Chris, anything else?
I am a simple man with a simple opinion. I look forward to the day that we don't have the operating system discussion anymore. Is that 5 years? Is that 20 years? I don't know. I hope it's sooner rather than later. It's coming, but it's going to be a hard road getting there.
Very cool. Claudio?
Well, man, I don't care. As long as they keep paying me so I can keep the Lamb on the road, that's all I care. I don't give a shit at the end of the day.
As long as you can put fuel in the Lambo, you're good.
That's it, man.
All right, cool. Dwayne?
Kind of on Barry's point, I just, know what you want to do before you kind of go off and start clicking.
Definitely.
Awesome. Mike?
I just want to say that I think that when we first started talking about the announcements from VMware, I think we got some exciting stuff coming out from Mirage and Horizon Workspace. And again, automation is king. And I believe that, if you don't even like SCCM and stuff like that, that's fine. There's always PowerShell, which rocks. And I'd also like to throw out, before we get done here, a shameless plug for one of our first female CGPs who has her own podcast as well, Teresa Miller. Is also got Current Status podcast out there as well.
Very cool. Thanks, Mike. Yay. Go ahead, Steve.
And one more podcast, The Frontline Chatter, with Andy and Jarian. We didn't mention them today. So
we already gave them a shout out last time. I met my quota.
Those guys rock. Okay, final words. Don't be stupid. Look at the tools as options, and don't just grasp. Somebody said just reaching out for something. Look at the tools, what they can do, move forward, simplify things, and look at how you can get organizations to work together within the different departments.
That's great. In my final thoughts while we wrap up here, all this stuff is really hard, but that's why they call in the experts, and I'm referring to everybody that's our listener and anybody that would consider themselves an EUC guy. This stuff is not easy, whether you work internal IT organization or you're in consulting or you work for a vendor. This stuff is not easy, but it is a lot of fun. I've definitely enjoyed it in my career, and watching the evolution of the OS image management evolve over the last several years has been very exciting and entertaining for me. So thank you all for your time. Thanks for tuning in. For those that join live, if you want to join us live next time, we normally have a live stream via YouTube as well as a crowd chat Twitter live chat. And you can just find all of that in one central location, eucpodcast.com. If you're not on the web during the call, then you can always subscribe. We're on iTunes, and we have an RSS reader for any application out there that you're digesting podcasts from. Hashtag on Twitter is EUC Podcast, and you can also find our Twitter profile out there at EUC Podcast. I'd like to thank all of my hosts today. This has been a very exciting and entertaining chat. Definitely a lot of us on the line, so thank you for moving the conversation forward. and we look forward to talking to you next time.